Derpy Hooves, Down in the Dumps, by me, Greenleaf. I was walking through town one day, looking over a list Twilight had given me. The list was stuff that we needed back at the library. Scrolls, quills, a couple bottles of ink. I kept looking over the list when my tail started twitching, which I knew was a sign of danger, and jumped back. In front of me fell a grand piano, which smashed into the ground. Then, a gray Pegasus with a blonde mane and tail flew down in front of me and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't hit you. I just don't know what went wrong." Then a large brown Pegasus, wearing a red worker's vest, yelled down, "Derpy! Quit dropping stuff on future customers' heads. Now clean that piano up and get up here." Derpy looked at me and said, "I'd better get going. The boss doesn't like it when I dilly-dally around too much." She then flew over and started picking up the pieces of the broken piano. I walked over and looked at how smashed the piano was. I then said, "Here, let me help." Using my magic, I reassembled the piano and lifted it back up to where the boss Pegasus was. Once up in the clouds, I saw the boss Pegasus, as well as two smaller brown Pegasi, and a floating delivery truck, too. The boss Pegasus then looked at me and said, "Kid, that was pretty generous of you to help Derpy like that. How'd you like to help us out today? I'll pay you." I agreed, and we placed the piano in the house that it was going to. We then flew around to the other places that various stuff was going to, and while doing a few deliveries, I noticed what had caused Derpy to become so distracted in the first place. Anything that had posed some form of distraction from something shiny to something colorful caught her eye. I didn't blame Derpy, though. I'd heard what she was like, and I kind of felt bad for her. At the times when she got distracted, I would have to hold the object up with my magic till the other Pegasi helped, and then we had to call Derpy back. At the end of the day, the boss Pegasus came over and put 30 bits into my hooves. "There you go, kid. Nice job. We actually got these deliveries done quicker than expected," he told me. I stuck the bits into my saddlebag and turned around to see Derpy looking at me with a smile. She then said, "That was great. I never had a friend help me like that before." She raised her hooves above her head in joy. I smiled at her and asked, "What do you mean by that?" She replied, "Well, I don't really have any friends." I looked at her with some concern. Ernan asked, "But what about Rainbow Dash? Aren't you friends with her?" "Kinda," Derpy said. "I was mostly helping her out on that day to try and fix a mess I made." I looked at her with a bit of sadness and asked, "You want me to fly you home?" She said, "Sure," and we flew back to her house. She invited me inside, and I saw that her house really wasn't that furnished. Pretty simple, really. The other thing was that anything that was a necessity was bolted down, most likely to prevent Derpy from knocking it over. "Like I said," Derpy stated, "I don't really have any friends, not even a pet, but I guess I am lucky enough to have a house." "Did you buy it?" I asked. "It's pretty nice." "No," Derpy replied. "The boss bought it for me." "He must be a really nice guy," I said. "He is," Derpy replied, "but I gotta tell you something. You see, I was abandoned as a filly, and when I was found by the boss in foster care, he decided to raise me like a daughter. I don't know why I was abandoned, either because of how I am or what, but the boss is a nice guy. I just think he got me my own place so I wouldn't destroy his." Derpy had a look of sadness, and it made me feel bad for her. I then asked her, "Derpy, how would you and I, as friends, like to go out tomorrow and take a look around Ponyville?" Derpy smiled and said, "I'd like that." Hold on. I left Derpy's house and flew back to the library, grabbing only a few of the things that were on the list. It was getting late and I was going to get ink when I saw the store was closed, so I continued on my way to the library. Once I got there and headed inside, Twilight greeted me and asked how my day went, seeing as how I was out all day. "Fine," I replied, placing the stuff I bought in the cabinet where supplies were stored. "I did, however, make a new friend today, a mare by the name of Derpy Hooves. She nearly dropped a piano on me, and I helped her out. I do feel bad for her, though, because she was abandoned as a filly and had no friends. And so I asked her if she wanted to to go out tomorrow with me as friends and explore Ponyville. I had gotten fairly tired and had climbed up to the stairs to my bed, which was across from Twilight's. I flopped down on my back and was just about to doze off when Twilight cuddled up to me and whispered, "I'm glad that you made a new friend." I placed my hoof across her back and fell asleep. I woke up around 9 o'clock the next day, rinsed my mane, then grabbed my saddlebag. "I'll be back later tonight," I told Twilight after I kissed her. I turned around and headed out the door, and just before I left, Twilight said, "Don't forget to pick up the rest of the things on the list." I kept walking, but said back to her, "I won't." I then flew off towards Derpy's house. Once I got there, she was all ready and excited. "So what are we going to do today?" she asked me. "Well, I did see a carnival as I was flying. Maybe we'll go there." "Here," I replied. She agreed, but before we flew to the carnival, I stopped by the ink store and got the ink that Twilight told me to get. We then headed to the carnival. Once there, we did typical carnival things, got some food, won a few prizes, went on a couple rides. Turns out the main six had the same idea that we did. So we talked. I introduced Derpy to every pony. Well, besides Rainbow Dash, because the two already knew each other. After we introduced and hung out for a while, the rest of the main six went on their way, and I told Twilight that we were going to stay as Derpy wanted to do a few more things. So, after going on a couple more rides and winning a few more things, we left the carnival and ended up sitting on a cliff ledge, looking out towards the sunset. Derpy was leaning against me, her head resting against my shoulder. She then leaned up, kissed me on the cheek, and whispered in my ear, "Today was the greatest day of my life." She then leaned back, and I smiled. Not only had Derpy made one friend, she had made 6 others. I really didn't think of Derpy as a love interest, though. More of as a little sister. Once the sun had gone down, I looked down towards Derpy to tell her that it was time to go, but found that she had fallen asleep on my shoulder. So I picked her up carefully, as not to wake her, and flew back to her house. Once there, I tucked her into bed, kissed her on the forehead, and whispered, "Good night, Derpy." I then left her house, making sure to close the door quietly. Once I got back to the library, I realized that I was exhausted. So how did it go?" Twilight asked. Fine, I replied. "We did a few more games and went on a few more rides, but that was about it." I yawned and headed up to bed, jumped in, and relaxed. Once again, Twilight cuddled up to me, but this time whispered, "I'm proud of you." I smiled, closed my eyes, and began to think to myself. I'd made a new friend. My new friend made a whole bunch of friends. And in a way, I now had a little sister to look after. My thoughts settled, and finally my exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep. The end.